everyone. We will be starting our session in few moments. Please stay tuned. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to WebWrap 1.0, presented by the IEEE Computer Society of 𝘊𝘂𝘊𝘐. We are thrilled to have you all here for our first session on front-end development. I'm 𝗙𝗏𝘀 and I will be your host for this evening. Also today, we have the honor of welcoming a very special guest, Ms. 𝗙𝗏𝘀 𝗏, who is the senior lecturer at 𝘊𝘂𝘊𝘐 and also the secretary at IEEE Computer Society of Sri Lankan section. We are delighted to have you with us today. Today, our main goal is to spark your interest about front-end development. In today's session, we will cover all the basic concepts of the front-end development, which will be helpful for our upcoming sessions. In this session, we aim to give you an understanding about tools and concepts of front-end development. I encourage you to actively participate, ask questions, engage with our speaker and fellow participants. Now, it's my privilege to introduce our speaker, Mr. Pasindhu Dina, who is an Associate Software Engineer at QLab and President of the Software Engineering Student Community and Post Community of 𝘊𝘂𝘊𝘐. Welcome, Mr. Pasindhu. The stage is yours.
I hope I'm audible. And let me share my screen as well. So can I get a confirmation whether I'm audible and my screen is visible for you all?
Yes, you are.
Nice. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you, the IEEE Computer Society of 𝘊𝘂𝘊𝘐 for having me on this WebWrap 1.0. So today I will be conducting a session on introduction to front-end development. So this session will mainly be focusing on the basics of front-end development. So kind of want to like give you a gist of what front-end development is and maybe get you all motivated to pursue a career in front-end development or maybe make it as a hobby. So yeah, so without further ado, let's continue with the session. And so first of all, I can introduce myself. I think Ivasam did a great job of introducing me as well. So my name is Pasindhu Dina, and I currently work as an associate software engineer at Club. And I'm also like serving as president for 2 clubs in 𝘊𝘂𝘊𝘐 as of right now. So let's begin. So the first thing that I want to clarify is like what is front-end development. So there is like a paragraph here. So front-end development, which is also known as client-side development, is all about creating the interactive elements that users see and directly interact with on a website or a web application. So this is like essentially like a window into the visual world. So talking about front-end development, like ages ago when like the computers were like firstly introduced into the public, there wasn't actually like really a GUI. So GUI in the sense like a graphical user interface, right? So all the computers, like the user had to interact with the computer through a CLI. CLI meaning like a command line interface, right? So where the user would have to actually type in commands and everything to get the work done through the computer. So advent of like couple of decades later, we had the GUI. So this actually made lots of easier for the general public to actually use the computer, because whenever you are using like a CLI, like a command prompt, like a command line interface, you have to actually like remember each and every command, or maybe have a book that actually explains each and every command that you want. So this is actually not really reachable for the general audience that isn't really literate on technology, right? So these computers were like actually like used by scientists and like programmers and such. So the general public really had the challenge when using these computers, but with the GUI this actually became easier. So like decades after internet was born and everything, then came the age of WWE. So with the internet, it was like really people were really able to like disseminate information through the internet. So one of the methods is like using the WWE. So that is like the fundamental technologies that we use to disseminate information throughout the internet. So front end is basically a GUI for the internet. So let's say that you have some kind of service that is available on the internet, but for the general public, without a front end, it is really hard to interact with that, because without a front end, they would actually have to learn how to interact with an API and everything. But front end actually makes it easier for general public to interact with these services, and it makes it easier for them to get services that are offered by other entities like companies and businesses really easily. So yeah, so let's move on to the next slide. So now, with that introduction, I want to talk about the importance of a front end. So first one that I want to talk about is like first impressions. So now let's say you visit a web application or a website, right? So you only know the name of that. So let's say that the domain of that is online ordering, like a online store, right? So you have this preliminary image in your mind about how an online store should look like, because you have visited those online shops before, right? Now, when you visit this online shop, you have some sort of an understanding about how these online stores should be. So that is what you expect from this site. Now, when you go inside it and the site doesn't look like as you expected, you will be disappointed. Now, let's say that the site that you go into actually has like pop-ups. Whenever you visit it, there are like thousands of pop-ups that comes into your screen. So you have to close each and every one of them, and it takes a lot of time to load as well. So your first impressions would be a disappointment in this website. So if you were prompt to like visit this site again, most likely you won't. You will look for alternatives, right? So having a good front end for a business or any kind of services that is offered through internet is really a must, because otherwise they won't actually have a first impression, and they would like the users that come into the website would bounce away and will never visit your site again. So having a good front end actually ensures that these customers will retain and come back again to your business or the site, so that they can get whatever they are looking for. But if you don't actually have a good front end and doesn't actually care about the user that visits it, you will most likely go and get visitors, or you will actually use customers. So having a good front end is really important to have the first impressions that's to be etched in their mind, right? So another important part of front end is the bridge between design and functionality. So most of the time, the front end developer's task is to like integrate the design and the functionality in the front end. So the design, most likely you will be like this depends on the company that you work or the project that you are working on. Like if you, let's say that you are working for an stable like a really big company that is like multi-regional and everything. So most of the time within if you're working for such a company, the designs will be handed over to you. There are like, if you work for a startup, maybe you have to work on the design itself as well. But in this instance, let's think about like a really big company. So most of the time you will be handed the design for your front end. So your job as a front end developer is to like integrate that design with the functionality that is requested by by the client, right? So that responsibility lies in the front end developer. The next one is driving user engagement. So like the first point was the first impressions, right? So even after first impressions, you have to actually drive the user engagement throughout the platform. Now let's say even though you have a good like landing page, so you actually retain the user for a couple of times, but when the user starts to navigate through your website and it doesn't actually live up to doesn't actually revert the user for navigating it, it is really a problem, because you have to continuously keep up the users engagement in the website and make them do what they want from our side, right? So if you can't actually provide the service without any interruption to the user, that's also a problem. So it is up to the front-end developer to actually drive the user engagement throughout the website. Now let's talk about the brand image and identity. Like in the second point that I talked about, true that sometimes you will get handed over the design, but at the same time, you actually have to think about the brand image and identity. Most of the time, if your client is a well-known client, let's say they most likely will have an existing brand image and an identity. So for an example, let's say like Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola actually has a color palette as well as a logo, right? So if you were to design a front end for Coca-Cola, you actually have to consider the existing brand image as well as the identity, and you have to seamlessly integrate with that your front end. You can't actually harm the brand image or the identity, because having a consistent brand image is also vital for the business, because when you have a consistent brand image and identity, customers know what they want and what they need, what they will get from this site, right? So it is up to front-end developer to have this brand image and identity edge to the front end. Now, this user experience is also like tied to the third and fourth points as well. So user experience is as in the sense like, as I said, like driving user engagement, right? If you need to have a good user engagement, you have to always fulfill the user experience. So user experience is like what the user feels by navigating your front end, right? Now, as I said, like in the topic of pop-ups, right? So if you were to like navigate a website and each and every 5 minutes you get a pop-up and you can't actually do it. Let's say that you are visiting a blog site. So you are trying to read this blog, right? But each and every minute there's a pop-up. So this is not really a good user experience. So you have to like, I know like when you are developing a web application, sometimes you need to do pop-ups because you have to like get the cookies consent. And maybe you haven't like read them about your newsletter, but you have to consider the timing for that. If you don't actually care about the user, what he's reading, and just like do ad hoc way of notifying pop-ups to your user, he will obviously get disappointed and we won't be able to guarantee his experience. So we have to also guarantee user experience. So that also relies on the front-end developer. So if the front-end developer does a great job of ensuring user experience, the customers will obviously get retained. And another one is accessibility. So front-end developers actually have to like consider people with disabilities. So there are like a significant portion of your users maybe visually impaired. So there can be like lots of disabilities that we have to consider about. So there are guidelines existing for accessibility in web, and you have to follow through them and ensure that the people with disability actually can navigate your website and get the services that they want. So this actually includes like making sure your website is navigatable by the keyboard, and you have to like also pay close attention to the contrast of the colors. So there are like lots of things to ensure accessibility on your front end. So that is also important. So all things these together actually like reflects the importance of a front-end developer, because to be honest, like the back-end developer will do everything that they want. Their primary audience is the front-end developer, right? So he will be doing the integration, but you know that the front-end developer is tech literate, so he knows that how to integrate those things and everything. So the back-end developer is essentially talking with someone of their own level, but the front-end developer actually can't expect that as well. Because the front-end developer is opening their front end to the general public. So there are many people that aren't in the IT industry, so they aren't like really know about the technology and everything. And there are like people who has like let's say people are in a hurry, so they want to get the services really fast, and people want the reliability. So there are like lots of things. So the front-end developer is like essentially responsible in keeping the first impressions and integrating the design and functionality, also the user engagement and upkeeping the brand image and identity, as well as ensuring user experience and accessibility. So that is the importance of the front-end developer's role, because it heavily a business could heavily impact the business success could be heavily impacted by the front-end developer's performance when he's developing the front end. Right. Now let's talk about some of the coding languages, like programming languages a front-end developer needs. So HTML is like the backbone of every front-end that there is. So HTML actually defines the structure of your web page, like the web application, anything that falls under front-end development. Actually, HTML is the structure of it. So for an analogy, you can think of it as like a skeleton. So basically, HTML stands for like hypertext markup language, and it is the standard markup language for creating web pages. So when I say the standard, let's say that there is a front-end developer in Sri Lanka, right? So he's making a web page. So he will definitely use HTML, as well as the American developer will also use HTML. So this is the standard. So each and every developer will use HTML for structuring it, because this is the standard. It allows browsers like everyone on the world to have a different agreement between what we will be using from developing. So they can come up with tools and technologies that complements those standards. So like I said, so it describes the structure of the web page. Now I will go and show you an example later on. So basically it's a couple of elements, right? So when I show you the example, you will get what I'm talking about. So it's basically a series of elements. and these elements tell the browser how to display the content. So a web page is like a web application web page. All of them are visible, like we get to view them through a browser. So browser is essentially what when we give the browser the code of the front end, it will structure and do everything like the styling, adding interactivity, structuring the web page and everything. The browser will do it by itself. So having these elements in a sequential order will tell the browser how to structure your web page. So I will show you an example later on. So let's move on to the next one. So CSS. So driving back to the analogy that I talked about, like the skeleton analogy. So think of like CSS as the muscle, skin, and everything. So right. So it is what styles these components. So obviously, when you structure the when you do the structuring, it isn't beautiful, right? So the browser will basically apply some of the basic styles that predefine default styles, and it's not really beautiful. It is not aesthetically pleasing. It looks like a web page from like 90s when the web first came up. So CSS actually does a pretty good job of like styling these things. So it also can do some sort of structuring as well with layouts. Other than that, it can like give color, change the font, and like add some sort of like animations as well. CSS has the capability to do that as well. But the primary goal, like the primary objective of using CSS is to style your web page and add some aesthetically pleasing elements and beautify your front end, so that the user that comes into your web application is like satisfied with what he sees. And just like I have to mention that HTML is written on .html files and CSS is written on .css file. You can actually integrate these two as well. I will go through the code base later on and explain it to you. So now let's talk about JavaScript. So coming back to the analogy of using a human body as the example. So JavaScript like the motor function. So we have the skeleton, we have the muscles and skins, but the movement that a human does could be equivalent to the JavaScript. What JavaScript does. So what JavaScript basically just does is add interaction. So let's say that in a web page you have a button, right? So if you click this button, if you want to have something happen when you click this button, JavaScript is the way to do that. So you have to define a JavaScript code to handle that event. So the event would be pressing a button, and JavaScript will handle that and then showcase you output. So basically JavaScript does is add interactions to the website. All right, so there's another analogy if you want. So if you think web page is a stage, JavaScript could be the actor. So they are the ones that are doing the interactions for the users. All right, so let's talk about the role of the front-end developer. So when we talk about the role of the front-end developer, we have to like think of what he does, right? So mainly front-end developers are responsible for building the user interface. User interface as in the sense what we see on the website, right? Other than that, these things can be like the user interface can be like written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that I just talked about. But in the industry, as well as like when you like move on to like the bigger things, you won't actually be working with pure HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you will be basically working with frameworks. So when the web first came up and HTML, CSS, and JavaScript were introduced, obviously people actually did the coding, like did front-end development using these pure things. But later on, people actually found came to the realization that they need some sort of a basic foundation to work on, so that the development can be rapid. So that's how frameworks comes to be. So frameworks are actually like pre-written code and pre-written platforms, so you can actually develop your front ends really easily. So if you were to use like pure CSS and HTML, and it might take like a month, but if you use frameworks, it could be like shortened to like 2 weeks, 1 week. So it's really easy to work with frameworks, but you have to first have a basic understanding, like not even basic, but a good level of understanding about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So this is a common mistake that all the people that comes into front-end development does is they straight go for the framework and learn the framework first. So let's say React is a framework, so they try to learn React without learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So this at the beginning doesn't really feel like a problem, because we actually can get like stuff done. We can look for the internet for resources and then like come up with a page or two. But when you delve deep into like adding interactions, like going into like complex scenarios, when you try to handle complex scenarios in the front end, there is a problem, because without the fundamental knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you come up with a problem where you can't actually move forward with this complex stuff, because the framework actually like throws in errors and everything. So yeah, so it's important to have a good knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before you work on frameworks like React, Angular, Vue. Now, then one of the other things that the front-end developer has to do is integration. Like I said before, the backend engineer will actually like code APIs and everything that the core services the website offers will be available through our APIs. So it is in the role of front-end developer to integrate these things into their front-end. And front-end developer must also guarantee the responsiveness of your web application as well, because at the current age, most of the people will be browsing internet through their mobile phones, because as of right now, there are more mobile phones than there is like PCs and laptops, right? So in like ensuring your web application is responsive will ensure that you will have more customers, more visitors. Otherwise, people that are like only have phones might not be able to access your website or web application effectively, because you have to guarantee the responsiveness and make sure that whatever the service that you are offering or whatever the things that you are offering through your web application website is accessible through multiple devices. So I also talked about this as accessibility in the previous slide as well, and there is also collaboration. So front-end developer actually has to collaborate more with other roles. So one of those roles is like the UI designer as well as the UX designer, and he also has to, the front-end developer also has to like have some sort of collaboration with the product design as well as the backend engineer. So there are like lots of people that you have to collaborate with to ensure that your front end meets their demands and meet their requirements. So collaboration is also something that is in the role of the front-end developer. So they have to like collaborate with multiple roles in the company, or like if you were to like work on a company, you have to have the collaboration between those parties. Maybe the part list might get extended as well, depending on the company or the client that you're working with. But at least you will have to like interact with those people. All right, so let's take a look, right? So I kept telling this website and web application. So what's the difference, right? So first, let's go through some of the websites and web applications to like find the difference between these two, right? So this is a prime example of what a website is, right? So website is basically static page. There are like some interactions. Obviously, there is some interactions, but it is very limited. So the website's primary goal is like offer you information about what, like in this instance, this is the official website of the city of Vancouver. So it basically like provides you some information about what the city is all about, what are the events that are happening. So this is like a basic website, right? So it doesn't actually give much value other than providing information for you. But a web application is different. Web application has like multiple interactions. Like the user can actually like request dynamic information. They can play around like play games and everything. So web applications are much more complex and offer users much more features and experiences. So let's go throughout some of the examples that I have here. So this is actually a really interesting site. I encourage all of you to visit this. So this is like a site called as 𝗷𝗚, right? So what this web application's primary goal is to find like really great front ends, like really good web development, right? And showcase them and have a competition like each month, each week to showcase the best web application out there. So I encourage you all to like go through this. So I'm thinking I'm having like this application is like really network intensive. I think I'm not really having enough connectivity to load this, but I encourage you all to like go through this one and find because there are like really good front ends here, and that has been like catered to users and done like really good user experience research and everything. So if you go through this, like obviously you might get overwhelmed with the level of details that they have put into this website, but don't fret. Make it a motivation for yourself, like go through these websites and find out what are the great things that they have done. Like obviously you will be wowed when you go through this site. So like I said, so this is an example of a web application. So this has like lots of features in here. You can log in, sign up. You can have like you can submit your web application. There are like lots of features that the user can actually do. Like lots of things a user can actually get from this site, right? So let's say my main objective for coming to this website is like looking at like getting inspiration for my front end project. So I can actually go through these websites, bookmark them, and have maybe like drop a comment and have like a conversation with the maker. So there are actually lots of things that you can actually do in this. So that is the primary difference between websites and web applications. And yeah, so as I said before, I highly encourage you all to visit this, find motivation for your projects, for your career, like for your hobby, whatever the reason that you are trying to do front-end development. Please make sure like go and visit this, find motivation, and maybe like go through those websites and try to imitate one as well. So there are like lots of feasibilities within this site. So I highly encourage you all to visit this. So let's take a look at another one. So I'm not really sure if I will be able to load this as well, because this is also a network intensive app. Yeah, so there is like a really interesting story between this and me as well. So this is something that I encountered before I started like doing any kind of like sort of coding, right? So this is actually a portfolio site, and this also counts as a web application as well. So basically what this does is it gives you a miniature car and the environment to explore. So this is like a really great example of an web application that you can actually like explore these things. So there is like a throttling system, a braking system, so like lots of things. But the website's main, like the web application's main goal is to showcase his portfolio. So this guy's name is Bruno Simons, and if you were to like, let me see if I can get a handle of this car. If you were to like navigate throughout this map, you can actually see what he has done. So let's say like obviously like some of you may have portfolios. I also do have one. So if you go to my one, it's like really plain and it's really boring. So it's just a static site. I just have a profile page in the name and about me and some links, right? So this is really not something that one would like expend, let's say maximally someone would just spend like 30 minutes. They will just see the name, just something and just go, right? But this website has left an impression on me that I always choose this website to showcase a portfolio and like how a portfolio should be. So this has great first impressions. It has done a really great job of showcasing what the main objective is, to like get people to see what he has done. So he has already achieved that as well. So if you play around, like you keep coming back to this because he has like paid a lot of attention to detail. You can have like when you break, there's like sounds as well. So the thought that a one man built this actually like sparked something inside me. So this is actually done using a library called Three.js. So what I did was like I immediately after I saw this, I started learning that, and even though it is challenging, I tried some of these projects, and actually it ignited something like a spark on me to like pursue coding in like, and I was really motivated to do these things. So I highly suggest you that you also explore this as well. So this is also an example of an web application, and a great one at that. Both of the examples that I showed you are really great, and they have really done a great job of showcasing a front end that is fun to explore as well as rewarding to explore, and has really great user experience as well as seamlessly integrating their brand identities as well. Yeah, close this too. All right, so let's talk about tools and software. So these things are like not front-end specific. Like these things like in a general developer obviously needs these things, but I will just go through them. So obviously you will need a code editor. So the primary, like the most popular one yet to this date is VS Code. So most of the people that use it, it's really lightweight, and it's also like really extensible as well. And there is Sublime code editor as well. So lots of beginners start with Sublime because even though VS Code is like lightweight and everything, there are like lots of options for one to explore. But Sublime actually does just suffices if you want to like get started with this. But VS Code is like the industry standard, like lots of people use it. Me myself actually use it, as well as like a similar IDE called WebWrap. I haven't listed it here because it's a paid project, but paid product. But if you have a university email, you can actually get them. And obviously you need a web browser. So you need a web browser to test out and view your front end that you work on, right? And then you also have to have like some understanding of Figma, even though the designer will hand over the design for you. Most of the time the design will be available through Figma. So you have to actually have some kind of an idea about how Figma works, how to navigate Figma. When I say Figma, I'm talking about the whole genre of design software like Adobe XD, Sketch. So I have just listed down Figma here. And you also need to have a rough idea on version systems like Git and GitHub, because obviously if you were to collaborate with other developers, it's really important that you actually have version controlling. So it's, I think, even though you can, like, if it's a hobby, you just don't need to have version controlling and you don't actually have to like upload it to GitHub and everything. But I think it's a good practice to actually like have good version controlling system like Git, and then have a central repository as well. So whenever you want to like apply for jobs and everything, you can actually showcase your projects through GitHub. And if you were to use GitHub, and you can actually host your front ends for free, like so that's also a plus point. And if you want to like deploy your front end, it's really easy if you have your project in GitHub with Git. So it's really good practice, as well as a really good tool to use. So I highly encourage you all to have like almost all of your projects in a GitHub repository. And there is like frameworks like Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is essentially like a CSS library, like a component library. So let's say that you are working on a website and you want to have a header. So what you can do is like you can reinvent the wheel and then code the header by yourself. But you can also use a header already available on Bootstrap, because Bootstrap has a really good component library. So I think most of the beginners actually use Bootstrap to like have some rapid development on their side as well. And I highly encourage you all to use Bootstrap as well if you are just starting out. So Bootstrap actually gives you like lots of components for you to use. And then there is NPM. So I don't really think you will need NPM to do like if you were to like do web development with like pure HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you don't actually need NPM. But if you were to like go for frameworks, I think you actually have to need to have some sort of an understanding about how Node package management manager works. So basically, this is like NPM is like a manager for like. Let me give you an example, right? So just like Bootstrap, there are like lots of people working on frontend, right? So they will come up with lots of libraries and lots of projects for you to refer. So when you are working on a project, you don't actually have to like reinvent the wheel each and every time, because most of the time, whatever the solution that you're trying to do, someone has already done it and have made the code available on the internet with like as a free and free and open source software. So you can use NPM to actually download them and use them. So NPM is like strictly for JavaScript ecosystem. So if you are like doing any other type of coding, there are like specific package managers as well. Like for I won't like go into them, but because it's strictly front end. But if you were to like work on front end, you must have like some idea about NPM, how to install a package, how to use a package, how to update them, how to install them. So all sort of those things, knowledges you will need. And there is Webpack as well. Webpack you won't actually need as a beginner, but what Webpack does is let's say that you are working on a project, right? So there will be like multiple CSS, multiple JavaScript, multiple HTML files. So Webpack, what Webpack essentially does is package all these files into one file and then minify it. So meaning like if you have like multiple files, obviously the size will be like too large, right? because size actually matters, because whenever you are loading a website, those source code will be downloaded. So having a minified version, like a less sized code, will actually help you to load your website faster. So Webpack is essentially a tool that allows that by minifying all your code into one giant single file, so you can actually have a faster load time on your web applications. And there is SaaS as well. So SaaS less, or there are like a couple of tools that comes under this genre. So as I said, like CSS itself is not really advanced. So we can basically like define styles for each and every element, HTML element. But SaaS actually allows you to have a do programmatically assign styles. So see, the base CSS doesn't actually have any like programming abilities, but SaaS and less actually has like loops and if and everything. So you can actually programmatically add the styles to your elements. And there is Tailwind as well. So Tailwind actually belongs to the genre of Bootstrap, but rather than components, it actually allows you custom classes. So I will explain what CSS classes are. But essentially, that also eases the development process of the front-end developer by giving predefined classes for them to style. Right. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about browser developer tools. So every front-end developer needs to use these tools. So these tools are provided by the browser itself. Obviously, because the browser is the main, like the environment your front-end will be available, you have to have an understanding about the front-end developer tools. So each browser has its own developer kit and like different features as well. So Chrome, Firefox, Safari, like each and every web browser has its own set of developer tools. So in this instance, like most of the time, people encourage to use the Firefox developer tools, but Chrome developer tools is also advanced enough to like compete with that as well. So I will just show you a sneak peek of that as well. So you can actually go to your browser developer tools by going to this inspect like. So you can right click any website application website and then click inside, and you can actually open the browser developer tools. So like obviously this is kind of like messy here, and obviously you will be overwhelmed by all the things that's happening here. So I will just go through a couple of them and like offer you some insight into what these things are. So as I said before, I said that HTML is a structure, right? So this is the structure of the current application. So there are like lots of things in here. You don't actually have to like mind them. But the thing is that there are like elements, right? So each element has an opening tag as well as a closing tag. So the element itself is this the things between the closing tag and the opening tag as including the tags, right? So this is a one element. So this is a head element. Inside the head element, you can actually have multiple elements as well. So this actually offers you a skeletal view of all the elements that are in this web application. So there obviously there is like a lot here. And if you like click on one, you can actually see all the CSS that is applied to this element. As I said, that the CSS applies to each and every like elements, right? So if you can actually have what are the CSS styling that is applied to this element. So in here, like there are like I will go through these things. So basically the margin, like if I select this, I can see that the what margin means. So in this case, margin actually means like the outline of this border. So if I can increase the margin, I can decrease the margin, I can do lots of things using this web developer tools. Obviously you will be coding this in your code, but when you are in this environment, you can actually like make changes and see what happens, and then you can test out everything that you want, and then you can change the source code according to that. So there are like multiple things that I won't actually like go through. You can actually feel free to like go through these things because there are like lots of interesting things. And there is also the console. So the console is also a tool that is like used primarily to test out JavaScript. So you can actually run JavaScript code here as well, and any JavaScript code that you have on your source code and have them print out to console, all of these things will be printed here. So even in here, I can see that there are some errors that has happened when I working on this application. So errors, warnings, or everything will come up in here. And for debugging purposes, you can also use this console as well. So in sources is basically the source file that the web browser receives. So this is the things that the web browser receives, and they uses this to create this web application that we see here. And we have the network tab here as well. So what network tab will do is like let me have another application and do some. So what network tab does is, so obviously like when you have a front end like here, and let's say that I want to go to images, right? So when I'm going to images, I will need all of these images, right? Because at the moment we didn't have them. So when I navigate into this page, the web browser will request all of these images from the whatever the thing that provides these images. So these requests will be logged here, so you can actually see what the browser is requesting from the for this example, the browser is requesting from this URL the resources that it needs. So in the network tag, you can actually see what the browser is requesting and what the browser is receiving. And there are like some other tabs as well. So feel free to like explore these things. There are lots of things. So this is like the application, like each web application actually has a local storage attached to it. So if the web application wants to store something on our computer, they will actually have to use that. And there is the memory tab as well, and you can also do some performance testing to see if your web application is up to par with performance, and it is like in a good amount of, it has good amount of performance. Yeah, feel free to like explore this. There are lots of things, and feel free to like watch any videos about this, because this is a really interesting thing, and this will be your friend when you are doing front-end development, because obviously you will run into like lots of bugs related to your UI as well as the functionality that you are coding. So this will be your friend when you are trying to debug these things. So having a good understanding about the web developer tools is essential for your front-end, whoever is doing front-end. All right, let's talk about HTML. So as I said before, HTML is basically the structure of your web application. So I just showed you when I was going through the browser developer tools, you saw there were lots of elements, right? So an element, as I said, basically means the starting tag, closing tag, and whatever the things that are inside them, right? You can also have nested elements as well. So in this instance, you can see that inside the HTML tag, you have head and body. So this is a standard. You actually need the HTML element, and inside that element, you actually have like the head element as well as the body element. These are like standards. You can't actually omit them. You always have to have them in your website. So basically, the head actually includes like metadata about what is the title of this web application, what is the logo for this web application, and whatever the like CSS files that it needs. Everything is defined on the head. And most of the time here, things inside the head isn't actually visible for the user. It is just metadata for the browser as well as you to organize the web application inside the browser. What we really are interested in is in the body tag. So whatever we include in the body tag, inside the body tag, will be visible for us. So we can have so basically in this instance we have like couple of elements. So div is like a divide, like a div, what do you call, like a container, or you can use divs as containers for your code. So if you have like a header, you can include that. Obviously like before HTML5 came up, like we didn't actually have a header tag. So if you wanted to have a header, what you would do is like have a div, and inside the div you would define the header. But like now we have like semantic tags as well. So there are like lots of tags. Beforehand we didn't actually had lots of tags because we had like a basic set of tags. But now with the new standard like the HTML5, we have like lots of interesting tags to play around. So there is a header tag as well as a footer tag. So whenever you are doing front end, always use those tags because they are semantically correct and will also help with the accessibility of the site as well. So whenever you are trying to do something, see if there is an element already declared in the HTML standard, and if so, please use it. Don't try to come up with your own ones. Yeah, so this is basically what the HTML structure is. So it actually helps us to structure our web application as we want. And all right, so let's talk about styling with CSS. So I will go through some examples as well, so you can actually get an idea about this as well. So in the first time, you can actually ignore this. This is basically a tag that is used to tell the web browser what is the version that is using, what file is this. So this is basically like metadata. This won't actually affect if you remove it. It's not gonna like affect it, but this is like a information tag for the browser. So it's best to keep it as well. And yeah, so everything is defined inside this HTML tag. So every tag should come under this HTML tag. And as I said, there should be a head tag as well as a body tag. So inside the head tag, we can see what is inside this. So these three are metadata. So metadata basically tells the browser about what this web application is. So in the first metadata, it says that it is using the character set of UTF-8. So which means that the web application is using UTF-8 for their characters. And there are like a couple of other metadata here as well. You don't actually have to like go through them, but if you are like interested in SEO and everything, please make sure to learn about this metadata as well, because including these things will help you to rank your website in the Google search, like search optimization. And one of the interesting things here is the title tag. So title tag actually tells the web application about the title of the web app. So I can open this. So you can see here that the age calculator shows up in here. So whatever the thing that you want here needs to be defined in here using a title tag. And I'm using like an external style sheet. So this is where HTML, the CSS is defined. So if you are using an external style sheet, you have to link it in the head tag as well. So this is essentially saying that find the file that is named as style.css and include this within the in this HTML file. Now let's go inside the body tag. So in the body tag, you can see there is a container. So inside this container, so this container is achieved through using a div tag. Inside this div tag, we have a container. It has a class. I will come back to classes again. And it has an h1 header. So the tag h1 actually means that it is a header. So headers are actually used to structure your application as well, because there are like multiple headers. There are like 6 headers. So h1 is like the biggest one, and going to h6 it becomes smaller. So heading 1 means like this is like a primary topic. So that is the semantic meaning of that. But because when we use h1, the browser will automatically set the size and the boldness of your text to it is predefined value. So in here you can see that the h1 text is obviously bigger than the other text here, because the browser is automatically applying some styles depending on the tags. As I said, that the tags are standardized, so the browser knows if the user is using an h1, he wants this topic to be emphasized. So that's why this is bigger than the other text that is found here. And moving on, there's another container as well, and this container actually includes a label, an input type, a button, as well as a paragraph. So all of these elements are defined inside this container. So let me go to the site. So I will use the browser dev tools to like inspect. Like obviously we can like we can't always go back to the source code and see like what is the container, what container has this one. So this is where we actually use the browser developer tools to like inspect what is like which element does this button belongs to, what is the container that this button is in. So all of this stuff we can actually use the browser inspect tools. So in here we can see that we have this body tag here, and if we go deep inside, we can see the first div container. So this is the first div container. So this encompasses all the things. And if we go deep enough, we can see the h1 tag here. And if we go below, we can see that the second container and everything that is inside this. So this is the label that I talked about. This is the input field. This is the button, and this is the paragraph. So everything we can actually like using this inspect tool, we can actually see what are the elements that are available and which element is inside which element and what is the margin of that element. So you can see that we have a margin between the orange bars means that this has a margin of I think it's, you see, yeah, it has a margin of 20 and 24. I should also talk about this as well. So every element in HTML is actually a box. So you can see that this is a box. This is a box as well, and everything is a box. And each box has these few fields. So the first field is like the actual width and height of that box. So in this case, it is like 273 and 28 something. And it can also have padding. So in this case, it doesn't actually have any paddings. Let me see if I can add a padding in here. So like I said, I added a top padding. So padding is basically a padding. You know, I mean, like the padding is a padding. So it actually wraps the element itself, and you can actually add like custom values in here to like increase the padding as well. And then comes the border. So in this one, we actually don't actually have a border, but we can actually, I don't think we can add a border in here. Yeah, we can actually add a border through this box model, but we can actually have a border for this as well. But in this box model, in this element, we don't actually have a border. And after that, we can actually have a margin. So margin is what envelops the whole element with the element as well. So having an idea about the box model is also important because it actually like helps you to debug any like UI inconsistencies, as well as have like a consistent margins and paddings, so you can actually have a good spacing throughout your web application. So also learn about this box model as well, because this is really important. This actually shows you what are the values that is surrounds this element as well. So box model is also important when you are doing front-end development. And yeah, so that's about it. So for the HTML one, so let's move on to CSS. So when you are doing CSS, you actually have to like select what are the elements that you want to apply these styles into. So this is an instance of applying styles to this. So this first things that are coming before the curly brace is called as a selector. So this selector actually selects what is the element that it needs to apply the things inside these curly braces. So in this case, it is saying apply this to the body tag. So the body tag is this one. So that style will apply to this whole block. And we have this like a strange pattern here as well. So it has container and there's a dot. So what this does is it says to select HTML element that has a class name called container. So if I want to see what there are lots of containers in this one. So this, let's go and see our HTML and see which tag has this container class. So you can see here there is a class called container. So this style that is specified in here will be applying to this whole block. So that's how CSS pinpoints what is the tag that you want to apply. Obviously, there are like more selectors. So this is a class selector. There is like ID selector. There is child selectors, parent selectors. So there are like lots of selectors. I will come back to the resources that you can actually learn about these selectors. So having a good idea about how, because when your web application grows, this is like child's play, right? When your web application grows, there will be like thousands, if not like 10,000s of tags. So it becomes like a really hard job to like pinpoint what is the tag that you need to apply your CSS into. So that way, having a good knowledge about selectors will actually help you to pinpoint what is the element that you want from that much of an element level. So yeah, now we talked about how CSS actually pinpoints the element that they want to apply the style for. Now let's go throughout this, what is inside of here. So basically we have a property and a value. So what this does is, for this HTML tag, its background color should be white. So that's what this is essentially saying. it is also saying that for this container, padding should be 20, and it says this max width would be 600. So there are like lots of attributes and values to it. So we can actually control the margin, anything that we want, we can actually control by changing the parameters, changing the properties and the values that is assigned in here. Yeah. So for an example, let's take this button for an example. So the button has a background color of this blue, right? So let's say I want this to be red. So I can actually use browser developer tools to like fix a color, and then grab this hex code and then go into our source code and change it here. So changing this will actually affect the web application, but for now I'm just using the browser developer tools to actually have a different color for our button. So that's how styling works. So basically the gist of it is CSS will try to pinpoint the element that it wants to apply this style to, and it will have attributes of that element equal to some value. So we can actually like remove the background color from here as well. Like we can do all sorts of things using these browser developer tools without changing the source code. So this is actually a really good tool, and I encourage you all to like explore this. So this will actually like make it easier for you to debug and come up with user interfaces for your web application. All right, so I talked about the box model, the selectors, and there is also the cascade, right? So cascade and specificity goes along together. Now, when you are applying styles to elements, you have to like there would be some instances where you are applying the same like two styles to one element. So in that case, the browser has to decide which style should I apply, because there are like two CSS instances where they say make this button red and another says make this button blue. So specificity and cascade is the things that the browser considers to make the decision as to which style they should be applying to this. And there is inheritance as well. So as I said, for this box model, for this body tag, we are applying these things, right? Because the body tag actually encompasses almost all of the visual elements in the HTML code. This is essentially adding all of those styles into these things. So that is inheritance. So the body tag's color could actually go could be inherited by these divs and everything. Yeah, so that's about styling. Now let's talk about JavaScript. So I won't really like go deep into JavaScript. So JavaScript actually allows us to do like lots of functionality within the web application. So some of them are like event handling, asynchronous programming, as well as manipulating the DOM. So event handling is the previous example that I talked about. So let's say there is a button and you click the button, right? When you click the button, so that is the event. The button click is the event, and we have to handle that event. Right? Handling as in the sense like whenever user presses the button, we have to do something. Let's say when we press the button, we have to like change the color of the button. So that can be done by JavaScript. And another one is the asynchronous programming. So asynchronous programming is kind of like let's say that you are working on a web application and you need some data from some other from the backend. But obviously, since you are requesting this data from the backend, the request has to go to the network. So there could be some delay when you are receiving those data, and means the while you are getting those data, the user should be able to navigate throughout your web application. What happens when you only use synchronous programming is whenever you are requesting the data, the web browser will actually freeze you from doing anything. So we can't actually do anything until the data is received. But with asynchronous programming, we can actually request the data until it comes. We can actually do multiple, like any interaction that we want. And when the data comes, it will actually do the things that it is supposed to do. But the user won't be actually freezed or blocked not to do anything. So it can actually manipulate the DOM as well. So DOM is the as I said, like the browser will like interpret the HTML structure and everything, right? So what the browser will essentially do is it will look at the HTML code and then construct something called as a document object model. So this is what the browser is using as the object that it wants to like manipulate, because he can't like manipulate the source code, right? So they have to have something. So DOM is what represents the web application that we have, and manipulating the DOM can be achieved through JavaScript. So I will go through the code demo that I showed you and go through the JavaScript file to show you what it actually does. So let's see this project. So this is a fairly simple project. So simple code base. What you can do is like enter your date of birth, and it will actually tell you your age. So this is like one of the most simplest thing that you can make. So if I were to choose a date from, let's say like 26 February 8th, and if I press calculate age, it will actually give me the age, right? So this is like a simple application that is doing this. So let's go through the JavaScript code to see what it is actually doing. So we have like already gone through the HTML file here. So we already know what this is doing. So this is basically structuring the UI for us, and we already gone through the styling as well. So it is applying all these colors, paddings, and everything. So let's look at the JavaScript code. As you can see, it's not really complicated. So in here, on the first one, we can actually see that it is trying to invoke a function called as getElementById. So what this essentially does is, as I said, if you recall, I talked about the document object model, right? So this document is essentially what that DOM is basically this. So using this DOM, we can actually get an element by ID. So what this says is, give me the element that has the ID button. So if you go to the HTML code, we can see this button has the ID called as button, right? So this is essentially getting that element into a variable here. Like that, it is also getting a couple of other elements as in here as well. And then we have a calculate age function. So what this does is actually like get the input, the date that we input, and then subtract it from the current date, and then give you a year. And yeah, so we have another function here as well. So this is like extracting the input that we input into the calendar that we saw earlier. So this is also a function, but that's not the important part, because the logic inside this is like irrelevant. So what this actually does is, it is registering an event listener. So this button L is the button that we have defined in here. So that is basically this button, right? So what this is telling is, whenever someone clicks this button, execute this calculate age button. So if you go to the calculate age button, it basically like gets the value that is inserted into that input field, and it checks if this input field is empty. If it is empty, it will alert us with the error message saying that you have to enter the birthday. Else, what we would do is like call this function and calculate the age, and we have this result element here. Set the value of that result element to the year that we get. So this is like the basic JavaScript thingy. So it is actually doing the event handling and manipulation DOM part. It doesn't actually have an asynchronous programming, but you get the gist, right? It is handling the button click event and manipulating the DOM and inserting various values. So values in the sense, in this case, it was the age of the user. All right. So obviously, this is just a basic project, and I haven't really like gone deep into like CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. Just to like scratch the surface of it. Obviously, you would want to continue learning these things, right? So I have like some resources linked here. So one of the primary things that you can actually learn, try to learn CSS is the web.learn.css. This is like managed by Google as well. So it's a really good website to learn CSS. So obviously, this isn't like video based. This is like article based, like textual. If you prefer videos, you can like search YouTube and come up with a video. But if you prefer textual learning, this is like a really good example of a good resource. And obviously, this is also something that you can also play around with. So this is called as CSS Battle. And I have played around this as well. So if you are like ever serious about using CSS, like learning CSS to a deeper level, you can actually play this. So each day we actually get an image in here. we have to recreate this image only using HTML and CSS. And we get graded by the amount, like if we are using like less characters, we actually get a higher grade. So the objective is, there are two objectives. The first objective is recreating this image. The second objective is using a minimum amount of characters to achieve this. So you can see that I haven't like, this will take some time to like recreate, but I have like just recreated the background here. So if I submit it, it will like compare these two and say the similarity and then give you a score. So if you were to like, so it's saying that I had like 389 scored. So there will be a leaderboard as well. So this will actually like help you understand like intricate natures of like CSS, like some of the tips and tricks of using CSS. So this is like a really good way to practice your CSS as well. So please check this out, because this is basically a game with CSS, right? So try this out. Each day you will get a new challenge. So like take an hour or so to like try to recreate it, like get the scores. So you can see that this is a 89.5% match with this one, because obviously most of the image is just green. But the hardest part is to like recreate these circles. So this you have to do with only using CSS and HTML. So this in itself is a challenge. So please try this out as well. And yeah. Moving on to the next resources. So this is also a good resource. So this is called as developer.mozilla.org, also called as the MDN docs. So this is fairly like complex, but this has all the things that you need. So CSS, HTML, JavaScript, and this is also textual. And I would highly encourage you to go through textual if you prefer them, because you like reading stuff is like really great, and you get to see all the things, because sometimes videos actually like, take this session for example, because I can't really cover everything within the 2 hours, right? So when it comes to a YouTube video as well, they will try to like stick to a time frame that they have, and so they will like cover like intricate and small detail. They will just cover the key concept as well. But when you read this stuff, you can actually get a deep understanding about everything, because they have links to advanced, like more learning, more reading. So textual is always a good choice if you prefer it. Obviously, we can't forget W3 School. So this is where most of you will start, and this also has like a really good curriculum as well. So you can go through these things, and yeah, there's lots of things, but don't fret. They have like tutorials, like live coding as well. So W3 School is also great resources to start learning CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. All right, so I will just cut these things out. I think we have reached. We have finished our second section as well. So a tiny detail you might have noticed is that this presentation is also done with Figma. So I don't really encourage you all to like use Figma for presentations, but I just use Figma for everything. So basically I just come up with the presentation from Figma as well. Basically Figma is like a really great tool. So I will go in deep into Figma at the end of the session as well. So yeah, that's just a tiny detail that I wanted to highlight in case you were wondering. All right, so this is also a fairly interesting section. So in this section, we will be talking about UI and UX. So when you are a front-end developer, you have to also consider these things as well. So when you see UI and UX, obviously you will want like have the conception that the UI and UX is like the same thing, right? We have user interface and user experience, so it could be the same thing, right? But actually, it's not the case. So there is like a distinct differentiation between these two. So I have a small tagline that helps you to like differentiate these two. So that is, UI is what you see and UX is what you feel. So this is a really good tagline to remember in any case that you want, because this may sound like you want to get it, but we'll delve deep into it. But this is a really good tagline to like understand what UI and UX is and what differentiate those two. Right. So what is the importance of UI and UX? So UI and UX is like really important. Like I said, like similar to front end, before the front end actually gets developed, we always work on the designs, right? So in the design phase, we actually have like consider UI and UX to the utmost importance. We have to give them utmost importance. That's why there is like separate roles for each one of them. Like there is UI designer, UX designer, there is product designer. So there are like lots of roles just because of this reason, because it is important to give priority and importance to UI UX and the preliminary design processes, so we can actually have a good product at the end. So yeah, so the importance is like when we integrate UI and UX into our front ends, we will be able to communicate information as effectively as possible. Now, let's say that we have a website that has like multiple pages, and let's say that the user will most likely want to like contact the business, right? So the user will come to the website and search for the contact number. But let's say that this contact, in order to reach this contact number, you have to go through multiple pages, right? So this isn't actually a good practice. You have to make sure that the contact number and everything will be easily accessible through a dedicated link, a dedicated page, or you should make it available in the footer. So this is a really good like a UX standard. So if we were to like consider them as well, we will be able to communicate information as effectively as possible, because there might be some information that the user might not really want, but there could be information that the user really wants. So we have to like differentiate between those two and have them available for them quickly and easily throughout your web application. And the second one is, if your user have a bad experience, they won't come back. As I said about the first impressions, if the user has a bad experience using your product, obviously they will try to look for alternatives and then go for that, because they will never really want to experience that again, right? And conversation rate to measure ROI. So ROI basically means like return on investment. So let's say you are building a web application. So obviously, if you are doing this like for a proper business and everything, it will cost money, right? So if you don't actually integrate like really good UI and UX, people won't actually come. So they won't be converted. Let's say you have a product and you have a landing website, and this landing website should prompt the user to buy your product. If the landing, the one that the user comes to the landing page and then gets their web application like stuck or something, they won't actually like have the need to buy this product, because they would like have a bad experience to it. So we have like pay good attention to conversion rate, and in order to keep a good conversion rate, we have to have a good UI and UX. And yeah, so using UI and UX, you can actually like fulfill the user's need effectively. You can give positive experiences for them, and you can also make a loyal customer brand for your application as well, because if the experience that the user is receiving is good, obviously they will come back, just as they won't come back if they don't have a good experience. If they have a good experience, you will come back. Because to be honest, like you can take you for an example, like if you had a good experience buying something from an online store and you have the need to buy something else later on, you would obviously go for that positive experience online store, right? And if you will not go for that bad experience, right? So that's how you build a loyal customer base using UI and UX. And UI and UX obviously will, if considering the fact that we talked about, will guarantee business success as well and improve efficiency for the users as well as you. And yeah, so I won't go through all of them, but you can get the gist that UI and UX is extremely important for your front-end projects. All right, so let's talk about UX. So before that, I think I will just cover UI first, because it's much easier for you to understand what UI is. So UI is basically what you see, right? So let's say that you have a web application and it has like good color balance, good elements. So, and it's like really beautiful to see. There are like good animations. So like you spend like a few minutes watching them, admiring how they are, and then wonder how they do this. So that's what UI is. UI is basically making it aesthetically pleasing for your users and easy to navigate. So UI actually doesn't really care about what the user feels, but it makes the user appreciate what he's doing, what he's looking at. So we have to like make sure that it's aesthetic, pleasing, beautiful. So that's what the main purpose of UI. So we have to like pay close attention to color, typography, spacing, all of these things. These falls under the UI. So yeah, so colors, like we can't use like, let's say we can use like red and black. That doesn't actually go through. So we have to like consider the contrastivity of the colors as well. So having those good color balances, as well as like having a good font with good line spacing, good paragraph spacing. So all of these things, that is under the domain of UI. So UX is an entirely different thing. So this is actually where we focus on how the user feels. So Now, when the user feels slow, there are like a couple of things that we have to understand. So obviously you won't like get what I'm talking about in the first time. So let's take a example of a ketchup bottle, right? So I think in Sri Lanka, the most famous like ketchup bottles are like MD, right? So MD has like two different ketchup bottles. So one of them is the glass bottle and the other one is the plastic bottle, right? So obviously, if you look at the like the glass bottle is, I think, aesthetically pleasing, and it is like really like you can have a firm grip on that as well. And like plastic, there is a like the conception in our mind that plastic is cheap and glass is premium. I mean, like when it comes to like phones as well, you will obviously go for the glass back iPhone like phone, right? So, but now let's see that even though it is aesthetically pleasing, let's see the usability of this. Now, if you know that if you use the ketchup bottle with glass, most of the time you will have a really great trouble of having the right amount of ketchup on your food, because if you are using a full glass bottle, oftentimes and not you will have a lot in your plate because you can't actually control the flow of the stream of the ketchup. And if you have low enough of ketchup on your glass bottle, you have to continuously heat the bottom of the ketchup bottle to get the ketchup out of that bottle, right? But the plastic bottle doesn't actually has these issues because we can actually squeeze and control the flow of the ketchup that gets into the food. And even though it gets lower, we can actually have the squeeze mechanism to get everything out of that bottle. So when we consider the usability, obviously we can see that the plastic bottle of ketchup is actually performing well, and it is giving the user a really good experience using it. So we can see the difference, right? Even though the glass bottle is aesthetically pleasing and good to hold and everything, usability wise, it doesn't actually give the user a really good experience, because oftentimes then we will be frustrated because we will either have lots of ketchup or we won't have ketchup at all. But even though the plastic bottle is not really good, like it is cheap looking, and it is also like not good for the environment as well, but usability wise, the plastic bottle outperforms the glass bottle. So that's what the differentiation between UX and UI. So UX basically thinks about how the user feels, not what the user sees. So when we are like doing UX, we have to like think about like a couple of things. So one of them is design thinking. So even before we do UI, like we design the user interface for everything, we have to consider about the UX. So what we would do is we would try to like understand what is the problem that we are trying to solve. So for an example, let's say that Uber didn't actually exist, right? In Sri Lanka, in America, nowhere that Uber didn't actually exist. So the main flow of how we will get a tuk to go somewhere would be having a contact of a tuk-tuk. So we can actually call the tuk-tuk and then ask him to come, and then we can go, right? So that's really not a good way of doing this, because sometimes the tuk-tuk driver might be busy, and sometimes you might actually don't have multiple contact numbers, you only have one, so you have to like search for something, and worse yet, you might have to like wander on the road to find someone to get you to that destination. So there are like lots of things that you have to do. So now there is clearly a problem, right? So let's say that Uber in America has successfully launched it, and they want to launch their product in Sri Lanka as well. So they have to understand the problem that the user has, because the problem in America might be different to the problem that we have on Sri Lanka, right? So what they have to do is like empathize with the Sri Lankan customer, like the Sri Lankan user. So they have to like understand what is the problem by getting into the shoes of the user. They can't actually like propose a solution from there and then just ship it over to here and then have a product launch, because that might fail because they don't know what the user actually needs. Maybe it's not what they're offering. So we have to like empathize with the user and figure out what he wants. So that is one of the first phases of design thinking. We have to empathize with the users, figure out what he wants, and then we have to like what we have to do is like define the problem with any structure. Obviously, we know that there's a problem existing, but we have to like define it on paper and everywhere so that the people can that is involved in creating this solution can refer that. So that's what we say as defining the problem. And after we define the problem, we can ideate on solution for that. So obviously, there might be like multiple solutions for this, right? So I mean, like maybe not in this Uber instance, but there could be multiple solutions for a problem that we are talking about, right? So we have to ideate all these solutions, and then what we do is like we choose the best solution out of those things. And what we do is like we create a prototype. So prototype is basically the product in itself, but it is a scaled down version. So we don't actually have to like spend much time or money on that. And then we continuously test on this prototype to see if this is the best solution for our problem. So that is the design thinking, and only then we will start to design UI and come up with the coding parts and everything. But we have like spent significant amount of time doing the design thinking and elaboratively defining the problem and then coming up with the solution, because otherwise we would be wasting our time and money coming up with a solution that isn't actually solving the problem. And when it comes to UI and UX, we are like a couple of methodologies you can use to have user researchers. So one of them is personas and wireframes. I won't actually go through them because we have some limited time in here. But do check them out as well. So they easily allows you to like have a good prototype as well as defining the ideations and the problem definition through personas. All right, so what are the main tools that are used in UI and UX? So obviously it is Figma and Adobe XD as well as Sketch. So these are like the design tools that UI UX designers use. And obviously I will try to go through one of these tools as well. There are like multiple plethora of tools, but these are like one of the most commonly used ones in the industry. All right, so obviously when we finish UI and UX, we would have a final design as well as a UX guideline. So we have to like hand over this to frontend. So as a frontend developer, you will get this UI and UX for you to implement. So there are like a couple of things that we have to like understand. So whenever we receive these design files, we have to like think like a front-end engineer. So we have to like come up with the layouts, and like in your head, you have to like whenever you see something done in the design, you have to like come up with the layout. What am I going to use for this? Is it flexbox? Is it grid? Like you have to think from your mind, like what is the best approach to come up with this. So if you don't actually have that, and then you start like whenever you get the design and then okay, I will figure this out when I'm coding this, and then immediately start coding, what you would find is like halfway through you would want to like change the way that you have implemented this, but by then that you have significantly invested most of your time into developing this, which is no longer needed, right? So one of the best things that you have to do is once you receive your design, you have to plan out everything, every layout and everything in your mind. And you also have like figure out the responsiveness as well. So once you receive this design, you have like spend some time trying to figure out how you would implement this. So down the road, you won't actually have to like rewrite everything from the scratch again. All right, so how do we deal with designers? So designers are the ones that will be like finalizing the design. Those will be like the UI and UX people. So when you are dealing with designers, you have to like prevent issues early on. So you have to have a good communication between them when they are like doing the design, because sometimes they might design some things that are not really feasible for us to implement. So we have to like have a good communication between these designers to ensure that the final design that they come up with is feasible for the front-end developer to actually implement. Otherwise, we would have to like redraw the design. So this is like a complete waste of time. So you have to like prevent issues early on by having a streamline of communication. So one of the main things that you can also encourage the designers is to using a design system. So design system is like a framework that the design has to work on. So having design system will actually obviously coming up with the design system is like tedious. It will take some time, but once you figure out the design system, you can actually have a rapid deployment, like development on your side, because you actually integrate those design systems really easily and come up with components and everything. So you can actually have a rapid amount of development from your side as well as the designer side, because they have all the things that are defined. So let's say that they want to like have a button. So having the design system, you can actually have the button pre-made before they actually start the design. So they can actually like copy paste everything and then come up with the design really easily. And we have to like also reduce knowledge gaps. So one of the primary examples for this is like one of the primary examples is like let's say like some of the linguas, like UI UX developers have like their specific language like words, and developers have their own specific language words. So whenever we are communicating, it's important that we both that the both parties feel their knowledge gaps about these languages, right? because maybe you are talking about a border radius, but he's talking about something like the corner radius or something. So there will be definitely like language specific knowledge gaps that you need to fill. So it's important that you fill them as well. And another one is like clearly defining user flows. So the UI designer might like come up with the UI and haven't like provided you with the user flow. So obviously when you are developing it, you will have the conclusion like, okay, so if I press this button, where does this go? Like, where do I go? The UI designer hasn't like clearly defined where this should go. So this is a really great problem that you have to like address early on inform your designers how to come up with clearly defined user flows, so you won't actually have any problems, because you are not in a good position to like suggest user flows, because that is the job of the UI designer as well as the UX designer. So without making it a blocker, you should prompt the designers to actually have clearly defined user flows. And then last off, you have like schedule a handoff meeting. So obviously, with the user research, UX and UI, everything everything is done, we would have an output of a design file. So it is important to have a design meeting with the designers as well as the front-end developers to hand over the designs to the front-end developer, so he can start working on that. And so it is important to schedule a meeting, so you can actually like have, if both of the parties have queries, so they can solve them. Yeah, so let's take a look at the good and bad. So I won't like really go deep into these things. Just I will like provide you some examples. So you can actually take a look at the Airbnb side. So this is like universally accepted as the best UX in the industry, because this is like even though there are like multiple competitors to this space, they have like done a really great job of having like preserving the user retention. So like check out the Airbnb as well. So this is like a primary example for a website web application that has implemented really good UI and UX. So for the bad one, I will just use something that you might also have familiarity with. So there is like a certain banking app, right? So that banking app is like has like the worst UX ever. So for an instance, if you really want to like transfer some money to one of your friends or something, you actually have to like register them beforehand on your mobile application, like the mobile banking application, and then only you can send the money. So this is like a really bad UX design, right? So the user flow would be like enter the bank details and then send the money, but the application itself like brings you on another user flow where you actually have to like register, like add those account details and register that payment receiver in the mobile application app before you proceed to send those money. So this is like a really bad example of user experience, but you can say like some of the mobile applications for banking in Sri Lanka actually does a great job of this. So if once you are like ready to send the payment, they will like prompt you to asking like whether do you want to save this recipient for future transactions. So that's like a really good UX design because sometimes we don't actually want to keep that user payment information within ourselves, right? Because it could be a one-time payment. So that is a really good, like a bad UX experience that I want to say. Like some of you might have that experience as well if you were to use that mobile banking application. And yeah, so we are reaching the final part of the this session. So this is about like building a component. So I'll just zoom through this one. So building a component as in the sense when you are doing designing, so you can actually use Figma to build this component. So component is as in the sense could be like part of the design system. So let's say that you have a button. So this button is like should be consistent across your web application, right? So when you're doing the design, this button could be replicated like 100 like places in like 100 places, or there could be like multiple places with this button is going to be. So one of the like if we were to like do this from scratch, you will have to design this button 100 times. So that is not really ideal. So what we can do is actually so this is like some kind of a demo into like how to use Figma as well. So what you can do is like come up with the button. So I will just come up with a really basic button here. Let's say add and like yes. And yeah, so I just group these two. So we have a simple button here. Let's wait for that. All right, so we have a simple button here. So let's say that this button will be recreated among like multiple places. So what the UI designer could do is make it a component. So basically how we do a component is basically I just press this one that just makes a component. So this can be easily replicated among everywhere. So what we would do is this is a component. Now we can take instances of this. Think of this like if you are into programming, think of this as a class and we will be taking an object out of it, right? So I will just take a copy of this. So this would be an instance, right? So like that, we can actually copy paste this everywhere. So in our design, we will have like multiple buttons everywhere. So I'm just simulating this. Now, when you are like moving on with the design, there comes a requirement that this button needs to be blue. So if you did this like the earlier way, like manual way, what you would do is like change like if there are 100 buttons, you have to change all the color of those 100 buttons manually. But when you go with this component style, what you can actually do is go to your parent component and then basically you can change the color in here to blue. This one. Go to the parent one and then change the color. So I'm choosing this blue one. So that will basically change the color of all the child elements as well. So this is like a really easy way of like adding changes to your designs. So using components is always a good practice, and you can also have your components in this assets folder as well. You can just drag and drop your assets from here, and it will adhere to its parent component, and it will just do like that. If you make changes to the parent component, all the components will be changed. So that's a really good thing that you can do. So I think we are actually running out of time. So I will just like give you some introduction into Figma. So basically here you can also see all the things, all the elements that are present in here. You can add frames here. You can have shapes here. The pen tool is used to like create custom shapes as well. You can add text. So this is a fairly like a simple interface, but you can actually get lots of things done, because as I said, I have also done my presentation in Figma as well. So you can have variables, or there are like lots of things to do. So do play around with Figma as well. You can also add prototypes as well. So yeah, like prototype is basically a way of like adding interactions into your UI design. So this will like further help your front-end developer to like come up with like have a good understanding about the prototype as well. Yeah, so that's about Figma. So I think I will just move on to the Q&A section. So if you have any questions, please drop them down. I think the chat is available for you, all right? If it is available, you can do that. If your mics are available as well, you can drop them here as well. So do you guys have any questions? I'll just wait a couple of minutes till we get some questions. Feel free to ask anything. I will try my best to answer them. Still.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are good.
Is there any easy way to convert our design direct to CSS?
I think there are like a couple of AI tools as of right now, but I don't think they are like capable of doing it perfectly. But you can actually have some sort of a conversation. But obviously there would be a need for manual editing as well. So you can actually use it reliably in production grade code. You can also use it for your hobby codes as well as like the basis of your HTML and CSS. But obviously you will have like do some manual work as well, because it's not reliable. They are not reliable. But you in Figma, you have this dev mode kind called thing. I think it's not enabled for this file because it's a paid feature right now. If you have education accounts, you will get them. So in the dev mode, some of the components can actually be like converted to CSS by themselves. That is actually pretty reliable as well. So yeah, let me see if I have a dev mode in somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
No, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think I have dev mode. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Can we create? Can we convert the Figma file to HTML CSS?
Yeah, like I said before, we can. There are some tools available, but it's not reliable. It's not like perfectly. It won't like perfectly create your website, but it does to a certain extent. But it is not reliable. So you have to always go back and check these styles are correct or not. So yeah, there are tools available now. Any more questions, Les? If not, we can actually wind up the session, right? So thank you all for attending, and thank you for IEEE Computer Society of 𝘚𝗙𝗏𝗪 for organizing this session as well. And I'm really grateful, and I had a great time as well. So I hope you guys got something out of this session as well. And I think there are like multiple sessions organized as well, so that we'll be going through like backend database integration, GitHub and everything. So please participate for those things as well, so you can actually get a comprehensive idea about everything related to web application development, SE. So there are like lots of topics that they are covering. So yeah, they are doing really good work. Thank you again. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Pasindu. And also, if you have any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the delegates group. So, we are excited to announce our upcoming sessions in the WebWrap 1.0 series. So, on 27th June, which is tomorrow, we have a session called Introduction to Backend Integration, where you will learn about server-side scripting, databases, and connecting your frontend with the backend. And then on 28th June, we'll cover web hosting. There you will learn about how to host your website and also how to earn an income through it. We hope to see you all there. Before we end, we want to thank Mr. Pasindu for sharing his knowledge with us. This session really helped us to understand front-end development better. And we are honored to have you as our guest speaker. To show our thanks, we present you this token of appreciation for your great contribution to WebWrap 1.0. Thank you for inspiring us all. As we bring this session to a close, we'd like to capture a virtual moment with all of you. So if you are comfortable, please turn on your cameras. Let's create a collective snapshot of our engaging time together. Thank you all. So as the end of our session, I would like to thank all the participants who were present here with us today. Your involvement and presence have made this session truly special. We look forward to seeing you at the next session of WebWrap 1.0. Until then, take care. Good night.